and you're booming and you're booming and you're deep. Well, on today's episode of the FYA Interview Series, we have one of our best friends, Jackie, who served with Fellowship for several years, was in downline as well as an emerging leader. She's got a fascinating story. Because of safety reasons for her in the places that she's going to be serving in the coming months and years, we're going to leave her last name off. Her last name's off today, but most of you know her from her time here. She's got a fascinating story, and she talks about everything from growing up in the hood to moving to the bougie part of their city and becoming a basketball star, to her story of choosing a college, and where she ends up is not ever where you would expect for her to end up, coming from Zimbabwe. But she's an amazing person. You're going to love getting to hear her stories. Please enjoy this interview now with Jackie. All right, well, our guest today is Jackie. She needs no other introduction. You know her and you recognize her and probably miss her a ton. But Jackie was at Fellowship for years and years, and we're going to get into that whole story in just a few minutes. But she is now on mission, and so she's going to share some more about what she's doing in just a little bit. But before we get started, for people who don't really know you or know kind of your story, will you just tell us, where you're from, how you grew up, what your childhood was like, all that?
Awesome. All right. So like JD said, my name is Jackie. Just chilling back in Zimbabwe, which feels like so weird because it's like I'm in my room, which is the room I grew up in. And who would have thunk, So grew up in the capital city in Zimbabwe. So even though we lived like in the hood, right, in the ghetto of Zimbabwe, like I kind of had a pimped out life, like when I would play like house and you're like cooking stuff, I used to cook like chicken innards, you know what I mean? Like, and that's like posh, okay? This is like a 3-year-old cooking up some gizzards, you know what I mean? Like everybody used to eat gizzards for dinner and I was using them for play, so kind of grew up with a charmed life of sorts. I know no one thinks gizzards are like charmed life, but it was.
Something got lost in cultural translation.
Every African listen to this is like, cheese, gizzards, anyway. But yeah, so just kind of grew up with mom and dad and my 2 older siblings, youngest of 3, and had just a sweet life, and pretty quickly mom and dad kind of moved up the ranks. So most of my life was in the burbs. By the time I was like 7 or so, I was living in the burbs, which was always very interesting when I would talk to like Americans, because they're like, so like, what's it like in Africa? And I'm like, I was watching Johnny Bravo just like you, so
Right, exactly. So will you kind of, this might be even a little bit too basic, but will you just kind of describe like where you lived, what it was like? Is there somewhere you've been here that you feel like is similar community-wise to where you grew up?
Yeah. Okay. So if it's like Memphis, I would say the neighborhood I started out in was like Binghamton. And then if it's going to be relative comparison, by the time we, like where I grew up and where I live right now with my family is like Germantown. So like not Collierville, but like Germantown, right?
No shade on Collierville for anybody who's listening. Right.
I love Collierville. Anyway, yeah. So, and grew up like going to church. I think Zimbabwe was one of the first countries to kind of really grab onto the gospel. So I'm actually on my mom's side, I'm a 4th-gen believer. So my mom's grandparents were Christians. So my mom's grandpa's name is Elijah because he was given that name by missionaries when he came to Christ. Wow. Yeah, so generations of Christians. So I grew up going to a Presbyterian church, and it's everything. Think like I love 2PC. Think 2PC. Like pretty traditional, calm, chill. Don't speak in tongues here.
You got an allowance on how many times you can raise your hand during worship, right?
Yeah. It's like I'm up to 3. It's too late. It's too many. No, but love Presbyterian churches. That's where I grew up, and so a lot of my formative years were there. I wouldn't say I was like really following the Lord or anything. It was, it's one of those things where you're growing up in church. You're like, yeah, I think Jesus is cool, but you're just living your own life. And I had a really fun time in high school. I used to play basketball, so like it's a common thing for girls in primary school to only play netball in Zimbabwe, which I don't know if everyone would even know what netball is. It's like a basketball, but like a basketball ballet. Okay, let me say that. It's so cute. They're like, and they're running, and you're not allowed to defend someone by the hoop. You kind of just stand like this, and then, yeah, anyway. Netball, look it up. Anyway, so I go to high school, and I'm coming from like my school. So like I went to high school in Collierville, right? But then my primary school was in Germantown, but it was like the low-key Germantown school, right? So like girls there everyone played basketball. And then now I go to Collierville, and everyone's played netball because that's what like prissy kids do, right? So I get there, but now there's a basketball team in high school. So I'm like a baller, I'm like, yeah. So immediately, even though I'm coming from this like no one knows it, no one cares primary school, I'm like a cool kid, right? So like high school was awesome. Wadzi and I, if anyone knows Wadzi, she was also in Memphis, was a resident of Fellowship, great friend, now in California. Hi Wadzi, she listens to this. Anyway, but Wadzi and I were having a conversation about this because she's like, you were one of the cool kids, like you never talked to me. And I was like, what? Which is so interesting. Yeah, because I was just hanging out with all these cool kids just because I played basketball. That was really wild.
Were y'all in the same grade, you and Wadzi?
Yeah, so we were in the same grade. Mm-hmm.
And we'll get back to that in a minute, Wadzi's story in a minute. But when you moved over and switched schools or started high school, you and Wadzi were together in the same grade, but y'all didn't really know each other very well at that point, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, our school was small, so it was only like 100 folks, but
okay.
No one, so you kind of know everyone, but not wow. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we weren't even really like friends too much, but you said we'll talk about that.
So you come in and you're just balling on everybody. Like
I'm just balling on everybody,
right?
And I'm like having this like weird cultural experience, right? Because like this school has like kids. Some kids, their parents are so wealthy. They have like this one family that had like a helipad at their house. I kid you not. This is like big league Africa. Okay, we're not playing games.
Oh my god! So what are the people like? So the families that are doing that, what line of work are they in? Like, are they all in like a specific? Are they all in government? Are they all in like big business? What are they working in?
Yeah, so these are like big business, government kind of folks. And like my dad was like just like working DHL, good company. He was doing well for himself, but like these people are like rich, right? They're just like not, they're like a whole other level. So I'm going to these houses for sleepovers, and I'm like, what on earth? Like I'm like, where am I? So it was definitely an experience. But what's interesting though is I was actually reflecting on this earlier. Like, I think I should have had some like weird comparison, like, oh my gosh, I need to level up to all my friends. And I think it's just God's grace, but like, I never really felt that pressure. I just kind of knew like, I'm just coming from the school in like a cute little neighborhood. Y'all are rich. Good for you. Which is kind of like.
Now, I mean, do you think that was something that your parents had like, you didn't realize it, but your parents had woven that into you guys, or is that just in your personality?
I think both. And I think my family, like my parents really did grow us up to just be really content. I think we didn't see our parents trying to level up with other people. We didn't have like a lifestyle or a life that was like trying to live it up. They just never did that, We just kind of like, we're like, we get to eat and we get to go out, and once in a while we can go on vacation, and that's enough for us, Yeah. So I think they kind of raised us to have that contentment. And also because I grew up like in the hood, right? Like that's why I started out, and my parents had started out there too. So I think for them, they kind of knew like, like we're so much better off than so many people. Right. We have no reason to like want to like lord any or like the ladder in this like aggressive way, but also I think it's my personality. I've just always kind of been chill, strangely. I used to be really quiet in primary school. I don't know if I've ever told you about this, like super,
I can't imagine that.
Church mouse. People at church didn't even know that I was my mom's child. Like, cause I'll just come to church and just be like super quiet. And like, even in school, just like kept to myself. I don't know what happened. Like puberty just like did something.
Well, I mean, do you think there might've been a moment when you first started high school that you started getting good positive attention and you were like, oh, all right. Like, do you think that played into it maybe?
I think so. And I think I knew that maybe subconsciously that like somehow I needed to just kind of stand out in this environment, right? So I'm playing ball and all these people are like kind of uptight, you know what I mean? And I didn't grow up around an uptight family. Like my family is like wild and out, right? So I was actually the one who was like quietest in my family. Everyone's like, she's so boring, So I knew how to be wild. And I think it was always in me. I just like...
Yeah.
It was just suppressed. I don't know. But so I just like
love that.
Let it out.
But it doesn't feel fake either. It doesn't feel like put on. It does feel like it's part of you. And so maybe it just you just needed to have your moment.
Yeah, I think perhaps it was like now that I'm in my own space too. I think especially on my mom's side, and I grew up a lot with my mom's family. I'm the youngest of all like my grandma's grandkids.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think that had a lot to do with it too, just like being babied and everyone's just like, oh, So now that I was like, in my own space and could just be me, and no one knows who I am. All my siblings and cousins are all in different schools. So I could just be myself without being like embarrassed or ashamed or people trying to like tell me like get back in your box or whatever, Right. So I think it was really a really cool time. It was a really cool time.
That's awesome. And so at some point during that, like you're growing up in a very like faith-driven family, and at what point did that become personal for you? Did you start looking and going, man, I think I might believe the same thing?
Yeah. So what's interesting, I think maybe first year of high school, I think I had like one or two experiences where I was like, okay, I think this Jesus guy, I think he's like actually real. Like it's not like a story they tell us, just for fun, but it was really only in college, first year.
Okay.
Where I actually was like, okay, Jesus is not only real, but he's like savior of the world, and I want him to be Lord of my life. But before then, I was just like doing me,
And was your high school a Christian high school? Was it a private high school?
Oh yeah. So I went to like a super prissy Christian. It was Anglican high school. So like, it's one of those things like we had chapel 4 times a week in the mornings, and we had a chapel choir. So these girls would wear robes, okay? And then like there was like the chaplain, the lead chick, she'd have like a cross on a stick, and she'd like walk in and they would like sing choral music. I loved it. And I was being so goofy the whole time, Right. They'd be like singing some serious song like In Christ. And I'm like, my hope is found. And I was always in trouble for making noise. I never did anything else in high school. Only got detention for noise making.
Oh my! And did you have like your crew people that y'all would sit in the back and kind of make eyes with each other during this time? Okay.
Absolutely. Yes.
So that was your and the people who were up in the choir and stuff, were they also in on it, or were they serious? Like they were really into
They were very serious. Like being in chapel choir was like a big deal, right? So these are like deputy angels, okay? Like these are people who are super serious. And I'm just like, they look ridiculous in those robes. And robes are like little weird things like this, like they used to stick out. Like the fathers, it's like the English choir. Like if you saw like the boys choir, where they have the things. And I'm like, what are they wearing? Anyway.
Filters.
Yeah, yes.
That's what it looks like. Oh man, I had no idea. I've never heard that before. I did not know that was your reality then. So let's talk about that. So you're in high school and you're starting to think about college. And I would imagine your uh, high school experience. Oh, look who this
It's Micah.
is. Say hey, Miss
Hi.
Jackie. Say hi.
Hi, Micah. Oh my word. These are like full sentences. What is going
I
on?
know you're starting to consider different colleges and everyone's considering international college. And why did you make the choice that you made? Because this has always fascinated me.
So technically, I didn't make that choice at all, right? So first, I was planning on going to South Africa. I had this like weird phobia that like, what if something bad happens and I'm too far away to like come back home? Because South Africa is like a bus ride away. So and like an hour and a half flight if I needed to. So I was like, I just need to go to South Africa. I don't want to waste my time going too far away from family. But then my sister was like, dude, just go to the States. Like, because the lady who worked at the US consulate had like come to my high school. Her daughters went there. And she had just kind of identified me. She was like, you'd be a perfect candidate for the US. You have no idea what you want to do, but you're good at a bunch of different
And
stuff.
no one there does either.
Yeah, you'd fit in there perfectly, you know?
They're all just floating along, just waiting to see what happens. Oh my god. Okay, so what was the criteria? Was she just saying like it would be a great experience for you?
Yeah. I think because I loved the arts and I loved biology, I loved science, and she knew that a liberal arts education would likely benefit me and maintain me growing in a well-rounded manner. And like going to school in South Africa, you'd have to apply like saying like I'm going to medical school, and like that's what you go there, and that's all you do, you know.
Right.
So she was so right. I'm so grateful for her. It was like the Lord is so sovereign, you know. He's like doing things when you don't even realize. And
Right.
anyway, so now I'm just like picking schools kind of haphazardly. Like I write the SAT once without studying at all. My score wasn't terrible, but it wasn't like great. So I was like, okay, that kind of limits the schools I can go to. All good. Um, yeah. So, well, of course, you had to have one adventurous school, right? So I think I applied to Harvard.
Okay.
Ambitious. Hey, you got to do it. But then like a bunch of other schools, and I actually found. So this is how I found out about Hendrix. I was cleaning. I'm in boarding school, so I'm cleaning out my boarding school room. And, you know, they just like a bunch of drawers everywhere, whatever. So I'm like cleaning something out to like store some equipment for something. I don't remember. And I like find a pamphlet. I'm like, huh. And it says like, think outside the box, Hendrix College, blah, 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 you know? And I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I go to our guidance counselor and I'm like, have you heard of this school? She's like, interesting, actually. One other, I already know of one Zimbabwean who's ever been to that school. His name is Lovemore. You should get in touch. So I like get his email. I talk to him and he's like, dude, just apply. You know, he doesn't even respond saying much. You know, I like, hello, sir, Lovemore. Thank you so much for looking at my email. You know, like all this intense stuff. And all he response was like, it's a great school, do it. You know, so I was like, okay. And the application was super easy on Common App. So I was like, okay, cool. You know, they were asking stuff like, what's your favorite book? What's your favorite candy? Like that, those were the questions on the Common App. So it wasn't hard to just add it on, you know, just slip it in there. They waived the fee for internationals. And I was like, whatever. And as you can tell, I'm talking about school names, not school locations, not really school size, not anything else. Like all I'm thinking about is like, what school is it? And what do I know about it?
Right.
I want to go there.
Did you have any indication like what setting you were walking into when you were leaving?
When I bought my plane ticket. That's when I was like, where is it? And I was like, Arkansas. Where is that? You know? And I'm like, interesting. So that's when I looked it up a little bit, you know? And actually I found out more from Wadzi because we found out like 2 weeks before we left, like the US embassy has like this huge event for everyone going to the US. So you're all putting like little pins on where you're going to go to school, right? Like you're like finding there like a huge map, all that. So then I'm going and I'm like, there's already someone going to Conway, Arkansas. You know, I'm thinking that's a weird spot. And then it turns out it was one other dude from like a different town. He's like, I don't know, from like Jonesboro, like the equivalent, right?
Right.
um,
Yeah.
and then Wadzi. And I was like, what? We're all going to the same, and this is like an obscure school in the middle of Arkansas, and there's three of us.
Okay, yeah. I had never heard of Hendrix College. Like,
No way.
and I'm from here. Like, yeah. Like I had never heard of that. And I grew up in the States in the Southeast, like, and then we had been living in Memphis. And I literally the first I ever heard of it was you and Watson talking.
That's crazy. It is obscure.
That is so interesting. What was the connection there initially? Was it like a denominational thing? Like was there some type of relationship with a church?
No, so it was just love more because this guy had gone there. So when he came back and said, I want to recruit people to my school. I think it's awesome. So like now the US embassy knew about it, and then they told like all the schools, like the what are they called? The school counselors about it. So likely there was probably a student before me who wanted to go to Hendrix who had like pamphlets. That's probably how it ended up like in my dorm space, you know, because I would have had no idea apart from that. No idea.
It's wild.
It's wild.
And so
but Wadzi had like extensive research. I had not.
Well, that sounds like Wadzi.
Yep.
So when you go to buy your plane ticket, did you fly into Memphis or did you fly into Little Rock?
Yeah, so we flew straight into Little Rock. I think we stopped in, is it Atlanta?
Oh, yeah.
And then, so like, okay, I'm like in the ATL airport and I'm like, oh, I'm in America. You know, hey, you know, this is going to be the life. Oh. And then we fly into Little Rock and I'm like, what is this? And of course, like you fly in, you get out of the airport and then you're met with like a door of hot air, right? This was my first time experiencing that much humidity. Like Zimbabwe is very temperate. It's like low, just below the equator. So it's like our weather is awesome all year round. So this is like my first time experiencing humidity almost at all, but especially that much. Because this is like the heart of summer, right? Like end of July.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I was like, where am I? And then we're driving to the school and it's all trees. You know, like there's no buildings. It's not a city. I'm like, oh my. And then they're like, we're going to go downtown for pizza first day. And then we get into the school bus and drive for 3 minutes at this like janky, like old Chuck E. Cheese or something. And I'm like, where am I?
Oh my gosh.
It was not an expected experience. It was kind of horrible.
So when you get like, are you sitting in like with like a pit in your stomach at the pizza place? Like, oh no, what have I done?
Yeah, pretty much. As I'm like, so this is downtown, you know? And they're like, yeah, this is downtown Conway. And I'm like, I'm coming from the capital city in Harare, right? Like here in Zimbabwe. And it's like, I can see skyscrapers from my house, right? And I'm like, this is your downtown. And the highest building is 2 stories and it's a bank. Like, I'm like, what am I doing here? You know, and the school right now, so there are no students yet, you know, like international students, you get there super early. So like the school's beautiful, but I'm like, who's going to be coming here? And I'm like, it's going to be some random rednecks. Like, I have this idea in my head, like this is going to be the worst experience of my life. And I can't go back. Like I had a one-way ticket.
Yeah. Okay, now did you know anything about Southern culture at all? Had you seen or experienced anything that gave you an indication of what this is going to be like?
Oh, so probably I had, but I had no idea, right, that it was like Southern culture. Like for me, America was just like all New York. That's what.
And that's all I knew. The airport fits that bid, right? Like the Atlanta airport totally fits that. Like, yes. Oh, a major city. This is awesome. And then,
yeah.
Oh wait, I got.
So my expectation was just like everywhere in America is like huge and fast paced, and you know, like everyone looks good, and all these movies. You know, that's all I knew. So I had no idea that there were like different cultures in the U.S. and all these dynamics. Everything I learned on the ground as I went. Yeah.
And what were your pleasant surprises when you got here?
Oh, that's interesting. So pleasant surprise. Actually, I think, well, in as much as I was like sad about Arkansas, first pleasant surprise was that the pace was slow. And I didn't know how much I would need that, because what's slow in America is actually like comparable to like normal pace here, you know? So I'm thinking if I was like in a faster paced place, I might have like really just lost my mind, you know? So that was a pleasant surprise. Pleasant surprise was the food wasn't that bad. Like I personally didn't have a bad food experience, so I'm grateful. I enjoyed it. Like freshman 15 was a very real for me. I loved it. So that was a pleasant surprise. I was like, oh, everyone says like American food is like horrible, but actually wasn't that bad. I was like, and our cafeteria was awesome. Like it has like awards for being great. So.
Wow.
That doesn't help. I kind of had like a unique college experience in the food department.
It's funny that how that experience varies from place to place where you're coming from.
Yeah. So true. Like, and I was like, it's not bad at all. This is awesome, you know? And the people, I think the people were a pleasant surprise. This was my first time being in a super white environment. Our school had, it was like a mixed bag of people. Like Zimbabwe has, had, that's a history lesson for another time, but had a pretty large population of like whites, Indians, Chinese, like they're like Chinese Zimbabweans, Indian Zimbabweans, you know, like all of that stuff. So I kind of grew up around a mixed bag of people, but Black people, of course, were still the large majority of the population. Yeah. So this was my first time being in a context where I'm a minority. So I didn't know what to expect. And of course, I have all this like colonial baggage, right? That I came to America with, which unfortunately some of it was affirmed, because in some ways America is still pretty bad, right? But in most ways, I had a really pleasant experience of just like making really sweet friendships and being super welcomed, and not feeling like an outsider at all. So that was like really cool, because I was kind of like anxious about that. I was like, oh my, this is different.
And so also along that time, you and Wadzie are just getting to really know each other and be friends, right?
Yeah. So Wadzie, the reason me and Wadzie were not like too tight in high school is because like she was like super saved, right? Like from like the time she was in the 7th grade, she was like seriously worshiping the Lord. You know, she's like the head of the Scripture Union, like the Christian group on campus.
Was she in the choir?
She was not in the choir.
Okay. But she was one of the serious ones in chapel, though, that you're talking about.
Yeah. Was serious in chapel, like the Christian group, she would like lead it. You know, she's praying all the time. I remember one time, she's gonna kill me for saying this, but one time she was dating this guy to like flirt to convert. This was like when we were like 15 or 16. And she's like, I just really wanted to know Jesus, so whatever it takes, you know, like, I'm like, what? So this is the person I'm trying to go to America to like live my best life, okay? Like I have big plans for how I'm gonna really enjoy the full extent of my freedom in the land of freedom, right? And then I end up at the same school with Wadzie, who knows my mom, okay? Like even though we were not like tight, she knows my mama, you know? I can't act too much of a fool because the news will get here, you know? Right. Yeah. And so I had to keep it together.
So also, yeah, she's like your mom's undercover agent, right?
Pretty much, you know.
She's able to like, you know, if like call and be like, I just want to let you know, Jackie is not doing well. She's not honoring Jesus with her time.
She's not honoring Jesus with her time, her body, or anything else, you know. So that kind of held me back. That was also God's grace, of course, because for real, I had plans to wild out. And Hendrix was like a wild campus, you know, like wet campus. You could have alcohol as long as it wasn't in a bottle. Like if it was, you could take it anywhere, like even to the library, you know, like, so you could do anything on this campus. They had like huge campus sanctioned parties. Like the school would pay to bring a huge DJ and like do like disco floors on the ground, like super crazy stuff, you know? So Wadzie is actually a big, Yeah. Was actually a big reason why I ended up coming to the Lord, because she met this chick who was a sophomore and she was wearing an I Love Jesus lanyard. You know what I mean? I'm like, who does that? This is college, man. Like, that's like rule number one in like cool kid, like just like logic. You know what I mean? I'm like, dude, what are you doing? But anyway, this other chick like sees her and is like, dude, you love Jesus? I love Jesus. We should study the Bible together, you know? So what he comes and tells me, like, I met this girl, she's pretty and she's cool and she loves Jesus and she wants us to study the Bible. We should go, because, you know, like, then I said I was Christian, I was not. But, you know, culturally,
right.
It's like if you grew up in the South, you're culturally Christian.
Totally.
So I couldn't turn down in the Bible. You know, that's like heathen status. You know, I had to kind of maintain a facade that I was
right.
I was still okay, you know?
Yeah.
And it was
like building up your brownie
all of that like,
buffer with your mom. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And also with God, of course. You know, if I'm going to be like really messing up, I need to at least still be doing Bible study. You know, like, yeah. Yeah, but it was through that, like through that Bible study and all these other experiences that we had, that like I came to Christ very early on, like October 2012. Yeah. And it was great. I think God was so gracious to just sweep me off my feet real early. And now me and Wadzi had to like learn to be friends, right? Like we were learning each other, and people were very interested. It was a very interesting experience, because a lot of people expect that one person's story kind of gives you a picture of the whole country, not only even of your family or whatever, but like of the whole country. Right. So it was really cool for people to be friends with both me and Wadzi, and we are coming from like similar socioeconomic statuses, and we're coming from the same high school, and yet we are completely different. Like they could not make any stereotypes because there was like no space. So it was good.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So when you guys are going through your time there, at what point did you hear about Downline and start considering coming to Memphis?
So me and Wadzi, we heard about, is it me and Wadzi? Was it not? Wadzi and I heard about Downline. Same time. This was junior year. We went to, I think it was a STUMO conference, like student mobilization. Oh. Folks in Memphis, it's like the CEO of like Oklahoma.
And Kenan speaks about those things. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we went to a student mobilization conference, and Kenan was there speaking. And he talked about Downline, of course, and he talked about his experience with Soup. And I mean, it was like, you know, like our minds were both just like blown into pieces. And I don't know if you know Matt Simmons. Oh yeah. He's in fellowship with his wife Anna, and so Matt and we went to the same college. Matt was also at Hendrix. Okay. Yeah. So Matt also found out about Downline at that conference, and Matt was like, I'm going. Like he was kind of like resolved. So he like convinced Wadzi, like, dude, let's go together. Because we were kind of like a ragtag group of like Christians. There were very few of us. So we all had to like stick together, you know? Yeah. I was just like, what? We need to go. We must go. We'll find jobs. Like God will provide. Let's just do it. So Wadzi was, even though we were in the same class, she was set up to graduate early because she's an overachiever. So she was going to graduate in 3 years. And so she finished at the same time as Matt. Matt was a year ahead of us. So they both went and did Downline, and I'll come and visit. And I thought it was awesome, and I loved it. But I was also like, I'm not that person who's going to do something Christian after university. Right. I'm gonna go and do something like cool, you know? Like what was your major at biology.
Right. Okay. Because you were pre-med, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm thinking like, I'm going to go and like save the world or something. Good job, you guys. Go and be professional Christians. I'm going to go over here and like work for like the World Health Organization or something important. But good for you. You know, that's kind of like, that was like my attitude towards Downline, which God has such a sense of humor. Like everything I wanted to do just like crashed to the ground. Everything. And like, it was like Downline was pretty much like my only option. Right? And it was very humbling because that was the thing that I was like, I don't want to do. And it's interesting because for a lot of people who grew up in like, or who are in like very Christian-y circles in university or college, it's like Downline is their thing to do, right? It's like, they're like limited spots on this stuff. But for me, it was like, nah. And God like reversed that for me real quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm so glad. I'm so grateful. He knows me better than I know myself. So I'm glad.
Now, so you came through a year later?
Yeah. So I came through 2016. Yeah.
Okay. And
And
what was
that
that
was
experience
a
like?
blast.
Yeah. Tell us more
Oh,
about that.
dude. Okay. So first, I remember when I came to the Downline Summit in February 2016. And came to fellowship because Wazi was already a member at fellowship. So came to fellowship to visit. And I was like, oh, if I ever lived in Memphis, this is where I'd go to church. Like that was kind of like, I just said that to myself. So really when I came to do Downline, it was like pretty obvious for me. Like I asked John Salver, he was the Downline director then, when we were all like having to church hop to find a church. And I was like, what if I already know where I want to go? And he was like, you still got a church hop. I'm like, but what if I'm like really sure? He's like, you still have to do it. And I was like, which was fine.
I'm missing valuable time here.
Yes, that's how I felt, So I think being in Memphis first was just a beautiful experience, man. I loved my fellowship Memphis family. Like truly, I'm not just saying that because I'm like on the FYA podcast. Like I loved my fellowship Memphis family. Like, so I think that really amplified my Downline experience.
And so when you got to Downline, you were loving fellowship and were getting, because you got connected really quickly. And part of that was your personality, and part of that is having friends who are already here and all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But what were some of the things that really drew you into being a part of the family with fellowship?
Yeah. So I think, like I was saying, I grew up in like Zimbabwe, right? Majority Black. And then I'm in Arkansas. And I had a great church family in Arkansas, praise God. But it was still like, just like very, very white. Like me and Wazi were like the only Black people in that community. So I think my first time at fellowship, actually, I was like shocked. I had no idea there were that many Black Christians. And I say that like,
wow.
In all earnestness, just had no idea, right? So just being in a context where I wasn't standing out, and I was with young people who looked like me, who were like-minded, and then young people who didn't look like me, who didn't see the color of my skin as the first thing that matters. They were just like, yeah, you're Jackie, and you're from Zimbabwe, and yeah, you're Black, but what? It's like, yes, it's important, and it's not ignored, but it's also not like this thing. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Oh, well, you were coming from small town Arkansas, like, and so if that was your experience, like that can shade the way that you view, especially church people. And white people in particular.
Yeah. So that was really, really good. And also just like, just teaching the Bible in a beautiful, thorough, and Christ honoring way. Like, so I just grew spiritually a lot through being a fellowship, opportunities to serve, not only like fellowship, but to serve my city. So at that time when I moved to Memphis, I was working at MAM. And when I would say like, oh, I'm from fellowship, they're like, oh, of course, and that was just like so beautiful for me to like be part of a church that like has its fingerprint in every single thing in the city, that like people were not surprised that, of course, if you're Christian and from this church, it makes sense that you would love the city and want to serve it, So I just really love that. The worship was bomb, of course. And of course the fellowship as well, just like so much fun, I think fellowship folks are just like chilled, like we're just there to just enjoy God and enjoy one another. So I just love the context, just being able to just be myself, have fun, make a ton of friends, eat a bunch of food. It was great.
We miss you so much here for all the reasons that you mentioned. Like you were a huge contribution to the community here while you were here. Phil Guy had called you back overseas and walk us through that process of you deciding where you're going to go and all that.
Yeah. Oh, it was really tough. I think even just leaving my community was one of the toughest things about that. But yeah, so I'm doing Downline and like I'm part of this super vibrant community, right? Like I'm around all these people who are doing the word of God. Like we are sharing the gospel together. We are loving the city together, giving to people together, praying together, growing in the word together. So like just the context where I was in and learning, of course, about the Great Commission. Like, so like fellowship is about the Great Commission, downline's about the Great Commission, and really having that impressed upon me that this is God's heart, So just growing in my love for the nations, really wanting to see people reached, I started living my life kind of framing that as a priority. So, the way that I gave, how I prayed, and really just started getting a really big burden for the nations. And I remember talking to Jay Atkins, and I also talked to Mo about just this burden that I now had for the nations and stuff. And they were just affirming me and praying for me and being like, yo, just keep searching and seeking and see what God would say, and it became pretty obvious that I wanted to go overseas. So first thing was to work for this organization where I could just kind of feel it out, right? Feel out where God would have me. So everyone was down for that. They're like, awesome, come through, tell us about it. Fellowship prayed for me, commissioned me out. As I was working for this organization, though, what became very clear was that there was an advantage to my Africanness, right? I could go into countries, go into some contexts where other people didn't necessarily have access. Or even just the way I was perceived working in the global South. It was just I had easier access even to relationships. And I was like, we need more folks who look like me to join in this work. All my brothers and sisters from the US are doing a great job, but there seems to be a need as well for Africans, for Latinas, Latinos, for South Asians, So God really started growing my heart and burden for mobilization and kind of growing the mind and heart of the African church for God's work across the nations in front of an audience. But this guy was trying to pursue me. And he's Zimbabwean, and became so obvious that I am not Zimbabwean. I think there was just how it is sometimes in when a dating circle comes up, it's the expectation of what it means to date and what it means to be female and what it, all these things just came to the forefront. Culture, humor, even, all these things are just right? It was catastrophic, And we only had a first date, and I was like, I can't do this. But I think that really showed me for the first, I think I was chilling. I thought I'm doing pretty well until that happened. And I was like, oh, I have a lot of cultural work to do. But also realizing how much I'm always just going to need cultural sensitivity in relationships. And so it's made me more wary, of just having a learner's mentality myself, but also seeking and asking the Lord for friends who would have that same attitude, a learning attitude, because I'm like, yo, I'm different. And it was kind of difficult at first being like, dang, I'm different, but now I think God's reminding me that Jackie, how you're different has enabled you to be in other countries. When I'm doing this mobilization work and trainings and stuff, you can go anywhere and be welcome because people just feel like you can understand them because you just know culturally to be different, Right. And he's like, it's an asset that I'm using for my kingdom. So it's been good for me to remember why God has allowed me to be what I am, but to also remember that I still have cultural work to do. So yeah, it's been fascinating.
Woo, that's a lot. So in coming back, I'll ask kind of 2-3 quick questions, then we'll get out of here. What is one thing that, besides people, so it can be something material or superficial, it doesn't have to be anything serious or heart level. One thing that you miss about Memphis besides the people, I know the people are who you miss, but one thing you miss from Memphis.
Oh, my word. Okay. This is going to be so fun. Okay. The food, man. I know I mentioned food before, but man, I'm just thinking about Gus's. Bit of a Gibson donut, man. I even just miss Kroger sushi. You know what I mean? I miss the grub. The diversity of food,
Yeah.
I miss, and I love experimenting with foods, and you can get into Aldi and just find some random cookies from Germany, man, and they're bomb, and you never see them again, but it was worth it, I miss that. I definitely miss that. And now I miss about Memphis. It's just like how complete, like Memphis is such an eccentric city, you know? Anything can happen while you're chilling in Memphis. Like you can be at a traffic stop and like some dude just like starts shouting at you or something. Or I don't know, like anything can happen.
Yeah.
I even miss like when I used to work. And there was, you know, like when you're driving home, like 240, I remember I had a dream of, I don't remember when, it's been a while, but I was on 240. I was driving on 240 and I was like, dang, I must miss Memphis. I don't even know where I was going, but I was driving. And I remember where the potholes were, you know, and how I like navigated the exits. I think even just the familiarity of a place that had become home. I think that's something that I also miss. And just loving the eccentricity of the city. So, yeah, definitely miss the man.
Well, lastly, we were talking offline about the changes culturally that are happening right now, and really just in human culture, not just in American or Zimbabwean culture, but because of the pandemic and because of the adjustments we've made and social distancing and all that. So, what are your thoughts on where do you see some of the opportunities that exist right now for Christians, for believers in community during this time? Like what are some opportunities that we are potentially missing out on or that we should really take advantage of?
Yeah. Oh, COVID's weird, man. It's a weird time, but I think in all things, God's always doing something, you know? Man, so I think something that's been really interesting about being in Zimbabwe is like our lockdown is pretty serious. Like there were some times when they were like very serious that if you were like not being compliant, like you were just being beat up. You know, there's cops and soldiers everywhere, right? So they're like, stay indoors. We do not have a healthcare system that can take it if this thing goes up, you know, which I think was wise. It's not great to beat people up, but like also just like anyway.
Separate issue.
Separate issue. I think a few things is brought to light. Just generally, first, is that like when people do not have the ability to just move around, it really shows how developed or how resourced the country is. I think my experience in my country is like people are more afraid of going hungry than they are of COVID. Right? It's like if I can't go out and trade and just like sell my tomatoes today, like I can't eat. Like I don't have a way to buy bread. You know what I mean? So I think that's kind of it's exposed things that need to work better in all our communities. You know. Yeah. And I think it's done the same thing with the church. It's just exposed ways that we need to do better. I know, like in Zimbabwe, like people are still sending out sermons and stuff, but it's like always on WhatsApp. And it's like some people don't have data, some people don't have electricity, so their electronics are off or whatever. So it's like, man, how much as the church did we equip folks to be able to self-feed? Like, do people know how to read their own Bibles? If we can't gather in a long time, could they still grow in their faith? You know, and that's a really big deal. Like what you. I remember we're talking about just like apathy, even not only about the situation and kind of like a compassion fatigue, but also just like an apathy about church and just like Christian activity and just being like, ugh, you know, that's existing too if our relationships are not like actually based on our own walks with God and are tethered too closely to the corporate gathering, you know? So I think that's something that's been exposed, but something that's been really cool. I think my brother, so what we've been trying to do as my family is we've been trying to have church at home. So we've been using a sermon maybe once in a while, but we've really been trying to like take turns to just like teach one another or do like discovery or something like that, which has been really fun. And my brother 2 weeks ago was sharing from the end of Malachi and how he was, Malachi was saying like, so pretty much in the end, a prophet Elijah will come, and what will happen is that children will be reconciled to their fathers and fathers to their children. And I think that's something so beautiful that's happening right now, where families are forced to be in the same space, you know? So they're having to confront, they're having to they're having to bond, and they're having to confront some hurts, they're having to confront some traumas. And for some people, that's been really difficult. Like, I know, like in South Africa, there was like a big rise in domestic violence cases and stuff. So in some contexts, that's been like really challenging. But I think for the church, as we're trying to be I think like God is so intentional that he made family to be the primary unit, that feeds churches. So it's like, perhaps it's an opportunity for the church to get really healthy, because families are going to be forced to grow in health and in fellowship. And this time they're going to have to rub on each other as much as they can and really see like, okay, I love you just because I love you. I'm not just a provider. I'm a dad, I'm a friend, I'm a confidant. And because we don't have other outlets to do that if we're being intentional,
Yeah.
So it's a great opportunity, I think, if we take that opportunity. And I've seen that in my own family, man. Like, the intimacy has just really grown, but it's taken a lot of intentionality. Like, this past Sunday, we did not want to do church. Like, we had planned to do it in the morning, and we ended up doing it at like 3 p.m. because everyone was just like, I don't want, I just want to stay in my bed. Nothing. We actually had to like come together and like repent and say like, Lord, we're sorry. But it's hard. You have to be intentional. It's hard. It's so hard to motivate yourself in this season. But God's on the move, man. God's on the move.
That's awesome.
I think he can do it if we let him. So yeah.
Well, I love that so much.
What do you think, JD? Stuff come up.
I mean, I think, and one of the things that we talked about before we started recording again was just the biggest hurdle in prior generations during a time like this would have been the communication gap. And when we look at what our resources are now and what our assets are now that we have for like to leverage for the spread of the gospel and for the care and the cultivation of the church, like you and I are on two different continents talking as if we're in the same room. Like, I don't even have to shout and you can hear me. Right.
Yeah.
And like, it's not even like in prior generations where we would talk on the phone. That'd still be great. But like, we can virtually sit and have a real discussion unhampered, unhindered by anything else right now. If that can happen, there exists no barriers for us in how we move forward in advancing the gospel. So I think there's been this thought of like, we're just going to pause life while quarantine happens. And I have heard this kind of toxic idea permeate of like, well, you've got this quarantine stuff going on, so I'm gaining my before weight, and I'm gonna like get my before body ready, and I'm like in isolation. But I mean, like what like I know I should stop looking at stuff. It's inappropriate, or stop looking at porn, whatever. But I mean, like it's we're all quarantined, we're all stuck. I'm all alone in the house. Like, what am I supposed to do? And like, if there's an excuse that can happen now, it's going to continue once everything is back to normal, normal what it comes. But if we have the resources and we have the assets now to be able to continue to cultivate and build the church just in different ways, then let's ask God, who is the owner and controller of all things, and is the way maker. Like, let's ask him for ways for us to then build the church, to build ourselves. Like, how can we be sanctifying and growing ourselves? God's not blocked it. God's not blocked it off or allowed us a 6-week period of get out of jail free card. Like, it's time for us to really take advantage of it. And when the enemy thinks he's got a beat on us, to really like, push down on his neck and get ahead. So
so true, man. And I think both of those are so important for us as young adults, who most of us are like stuck by ourselves. You know what I mean? Like in this season, like, you living by yourself, maybe with a roommate or 2 or 3, but still it's like max 4 people. So you're just single, living life, or you and your husband, no kids yet, or whatever. It's like take advantage of the digital space and also develop practices. Like, we don't know how long it's gonna last. Like, we gotta just develop discipline. I love what you're saying. Like, me and my little sister started working out every morning too, and that's really helped me as well. So like, trying to stay fit, trying to get some endorphins going, because nothing else is giving me endorphins, because it's depressing. unless you like do something to just help pump yourself up, but also it allows for spiritual discipline as well, so I think that's so good.
Well,
So
Jackie,
true.
this has been
So
awesome.
true.
Thank you so much for coming on with us. And we're going to have to get you on again to update us. Before you go, will you tell us how can we support you during this time, and what are some things we can be praying for you specifically?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been so much fun. Man, ways to support me. I think something that I'm trying to do is to help out as many families as possible who are just like not working right now, don't have enough. So man, like if you want to, and I can give JD like my giving platform. If you want to give towards that, just signify it in there. Like, would love to feed as many families as possible, hoping to get that going, because I think even though we're kind of coming to the end of lockdown, that might still be an issue. And also, just like for me personally, man, if you just want to shoot me a text to say what's up, I love that. I know, I think it was yesterday, Paige was just like, I'm just thinking of you, hi. And I was like, oh, that's so sweet. I think to just know that you're still being thought of in the community is just like always so encouraging. So man, don't be afraid to shoot me a text, shoot me a message, whatever. Like I love to let to just remember that like my community is still there and thinking of me and stuff. That's a great way to support me personally as well. And in terms of prayer, man, please pray. God has allowed a few ways to continue ministry, but it's been super challenging, given that like the things I was talking about, like many people don't, they can't like do Zoom because data is super expensive. So it's like we're depending on a lot of texting, calling once in a while, so just, I think asking the Lord for wisdom and how best to do that, asking the Lord even for ways to also maybe we can possibly finance ways to get more people engaged on Zoom and stuff like that, especially some disciples who have become very faithful but just don't have a way to keep in touch with me, so just asking the Lord for wisdom in regards to that. Protection for family with this COVID thing, because our healthcare system would not be able to handle it. I feel like I'm not being anxious. I've been really trusting the Lord in that regard, but wanting to continue to just bring that before God, just so we have max safety and and also just praying that this may be a time of great revival. I think everyone just kind of feels that in the air, that there's great potential if the body of believers would really just like humble themselves and really say, okay, Lord, like we're at the end of ourselves. Like you've shown us that like we have no power at all. Now use us for whatever you want. I think if we come to that position of humility and not running away from the situation or being so quick to find solutions and just being like, we can't do anything, but we want to be vessels. I feel there's great potential for revival, so just praying that God would do something crazy and that like just like millions of people would come to know God, and even people of other faiths would see the reality of the beauty of Jesus Christ and would come to know him, that this could be a time for missions, great missions mobilization, using every platform for God's glory.
Awesome. Well, Jackie, this was awesome. We will be praying for you. We're going to,
thanks, bro.
Rather than post all of your information publicly, just for your safety as you go overseas, various places, if you want to get in touch with Jackie and you want to find out ways to give, ways to connect with her, if you'll DM our Instagram account or just reach out to me individually, I can help get you all the connection you'd ever want to have there. And so, Jackie, we will connect with you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, bro. Great seeing you.
Likewise.
A common one bit.